after 6, I'll just go ahead and start with some general introductions and what have you and get things going, including introducing myself. So my name is Harriet Emerson, and I'm the group leader for Salt Lake Thrive. So Salt Lake Thrive is very similar to Plant-Based Pittsburgh, which Sally was describing, a local community group. We work to raise awareness of the many benefits, as we'll be discussing tonight, of a healthy, plant-strong diet and lifestyle. And in addition to the health benefits, Thrive, we also help people promote awareness of the environmental benefits of a plant-strong diet, as well as helping to create a more compassionate world for millions of animals. We're having this event tonight and this month because, as many of you may know, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And breast cancer is the second leading cause of cancer-related death among women. But the good news is, so yes, it's something that we all should be aware of. But the good news is that there's extensive evidence that certain lifestyle factors, including a healthy, plant-based, plant-centered diet, can help promote breast health and also help reduce the relative risk of breast cancer. So with us, to discuss this very important information tonight, we have Dr. Niki Davis, and very pleased to have her and very much appreciate her taking the time to talk to us about this very important topic. So Dr. Davis is a board certified family doctor originally from Salt Lake, and she received her degree in medicine from the University of Utah. And she really has, you'll see from her presentation tonight, she really has a great passion about helping to spread awareness of the health benefits of a plant-strong diet, including, once again, to help prevent breast cancer. She's been able to work with some of the best well-known plant-based experts in nutrition, such as Dr. John McDougall, Dr. Michael Clapper, and Dr. Alan Goldhammer. And when she's not doing presentations with Sally and me, she can be found speaking at plant-based events around the world and running wellness retreats also. So without further ado, I'll turn over to Dr. Niki Davis and let her tell us about all the great benefits of a plant-centered diet to help promote breast health and other effects.
Thank you so much, Harriet. I'm so excited to be here and get to speak with all of you. This is wonderful. So I'm going to try to share my screen here. Let's see if this works. All right, perfect. Everybody seeing that? Thumbs up? Perfect. All right. So I want to thank all of you, first of all, for being a part of this today. I know sometimes it's hard, especially this time of night, to get away from family things and to make the time for something like this. But I really appreciate all of you being here. It's exciting because you all are going to learn something new, I hope, tonight, and then be able to share that with other people. So we're hoping to spread this around to more people. So as Harriet mentioned already, the reason I'm here today is because of a collaboration between Salt Lake Thrive, based here in Salt Lake City, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and Plant-Based Pittsburgh. So a little bit about myself. You heard a little bit about me from Harriet, but I'll tell you a little bit about myself as well. So I am, as she mentioned, a board certified family medicine doctor, and I am extremely passionate about nutrition and lifestyle medicine, and especially its ability to prevent and reverse chronic disease. So I live in Salt Lake City currently, and that's also where I went to medical school, so the University of Utah School of Medicine. And once I graduated, I moved to Billings, Montana with my family and completed a 3-year residency in family medicine. And I do recognize one, maybe two people from Montana that are on tonight, so that's exciting. But medicine is not my first career, so this is my second career. And some of you, if you watched the Exam Room podcast where I was talking to Chuck Carroll, might know that I used to work as a rocket scientist. So my first career was in mechanical engineering. I went to school knew that I really loved math and science, and I was actually very interested in medicine and especially nutrition at that time, but I thought that it would probably just take too long to get through schooling. So I decided to do engineering. So I did a bachelor's and a master's in engineering, went and worked for a company that is a contractor for NASA, and worked on the space shuttle program for about 7 years. It was an exciting job, and I got to do some fun things, but at the end of the day, what I found was I was spending most of my off time researching nutrition, talking people's ears off about nutrition, eating plant-based, super passionate about it, and especially finding that link between diet and disease. In fact, I read the China study and I made my mom read it for my birthday. And that kind of started the snowball effect of, I'm not meant to be an engineer. So one day I just up and quit my job, and my husband wasn't very excited about it at the time, but I quit my job and decided to go back to school again. And here I am. So I just graduated from my residency in June of this year. So I'm all done with training, and now I get to go out and do my thing that I love the most, which is to help people heal, get well, and educate others about this lifestyle. So thank you again for all of you for coming here today. And as Harriet had mentioned, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So that is why we are talking about breast health today. We want to talk about all of the implications in breast health and diet. So the things we're going to talk about today, first of all, I'm going to start with why what we rely on now, I don't believe, is enough. So all of the things that we are told is going to help us either prevent breast cancer or decrease the chance of us dying from breast cancer, why all of those things that your doctor is telling you, in my opinion, is just not enough. It's not getting there. And then we'll talk about what can we do to actually prevent breast cancer. And at the end, I'm going to go through some research that links diet and breast cancer, both the good and bad of diet. So as Harriet mentioned earlier, 1 in 8 women in the United States will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime. I would be interested if you all want to go into the chat and maybe give a thumbs up or type something on there if you or someone you know has been affected by breast cancer. So 1 in 8 women, that's 12% of women. And you think, let's say, if we look at our 42 participants today in this meeting, how many of those will be diagnosed with breast cancer? So we're looking at 5 or 6 of us just here talking right now. So that's terrifying. And in 2020, this year, the American Cancer Society estimates that we'll have 300,000 new cases of breast cancer and 42,000 deaths from breast cancer in the United States. And as Harriet also mentioned, it is the second leading cause of cancer death in women. Now, breast cancer does seem to be largely preventable by way of a healthy diet and lifestyle. But what are we told to do? So is there anyone who wants to type in the chat? What are they told to do by their doctors? Let's see what people are saying. Okay, so annual checkups, mammogram, yep. So perfect. Yep, that's exactly. So find it early. So that's the idea, right? Find it the earliest possible to give you the best chance of detecting it early and then being able to intervene to help save your life, right? So finding it early. So here are the 3 things that we typically think of with finding it early. So the first one is self-breast exams. So self-breast exams are something that probably some of you are familiar with, that you were taught maybe by your doctor or given a pamphlet by your doctor in the past to help find a lump so that you might be able to get imaging or a biopsy to help reduce your risk of dying from breast cancer. Well, nowadays, we don't teach our patients to do self-breast exams. And in fact, the United States Preventive Services Task Force recommends against it. Now you'd think, well, gosh, why? What's the harm in doing a self-breast exam? Well, first of all, there's no reduction in mortality. So you finding a lump is not going to mean that you are going to live longer. The other part of it is if you do find a lump and then you go to your doctor, chances are they might say, well, just to be safe, let's do some imaging or let's get a biopsy. And now you're going down this road of getting these interventions that you may never have needed. So that's why they recommend against self-breast exams. It's kind of similar for the clinical breast exam. So some doctors are still doing these. There is just inadequate evidence. So it's not recommended against as strongly as the self-breast exams, but there is just not good evidence. And there is, again, with this, potentially unnecessary imaging and biopsying from the clinical breast exams. So the one thing that we can do to improve mortality benefit is mammograms. Now, mammograms are a little bit controversial as far as when to start them. ACOG, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, recommend starting at age 40. And the United States Preventive Services Task Force says about the age of 50. So what I want to talk to you about today is what the actual benefit is of mammograms, just so that you know what you're getting into. Because I think a lot of people think if I just get my mammograms every year, every 2 years, that will help save me from getting a deadly breast cancer. But I want you to be really familiar with what that actually means, getting that mammogram. So what we're told is that you will reduce your risk of death from breast cancer by 20% if you get a mammogram. And this is true, and it seems like a huge number, so why not get a mammogram? So let's talk about that. Where do they get that 20% number? So for women who are less than 50 years old, about 1 life is saved for every 2,000 mammograms done. And if you're over 50, about 1 life is saved for every 1,400 mammograms done. So you can see why there's a little bit of a difference between when to start around 40 or 50. So what I want you to do is imagine a theater full of 1,000 women, okay? So just to make easy numbers, I've already told you that about 1 out of every 1,000 to 2,000 women who get mammograms, lives are saved, 1 life. But let's just, for easy numbers, make it 1,000. So this is going to be our theater that's filled with 1,000 women who are getting a mammogram. So if you look in the middle there, there's a woman wearing a red dress, and she's the one that got saved from getting the mammogram. So what about the other women? Well, half of the women in this audience, if they are good and they listen to their doctor and they do regular mammograms for their lifetime, will at some point get a false positive result. False positive, that just means that we think you probably have something scary like a cancer, but in fact you don't. So people will go through the anxiety of thinking they might have something that they don't. So half of the women, if they do regular mammograms for their lifetime, 64 out of the 1,000 women will get biopsies of benign non-cancerous lumps. So 64 women will get biopsies. 10 out of the 1,000 women will get treatment. So 10 of those women in one of those front rows is going to get chemotherapy, radiation, surgery for a cancer that never would have caused a problem in their lifetime. And this is something that in the medical community, we call it overdiagnosis. So even though those women did have breast cancer, that breast cancer never would have affected their life. It wouldn't have shortened their life. It wouldn't have caused any issues in their life. But because they were diagnosed, they're getting treated, which could affect the quality of their life. Now, there are still those that will get unnecessary earlier treatment for cancers that would cause problems but wouldn't shorten their life. Does that make sense? So their life is still going to be the same amount of time, but it will possibly cause some issues with their life, and they're going to get unnecessary early treatment that will not add any years to their life. Now, don't forget that even with regular screening, sometimes we can still miss deadly cancers. We're not going to catch all of them. And then some tumors, even if we catch them early, are still going to be fatal. So remember that risk reduction we talked about earlier, the 20% risk reduction in breast cancer death if you get a mammogram. Now what I want you to do is look at two theaters. So one theater has 1,000 women, the other one has 1,000 women. The top theater has 1,000 women who got their mammogram. The bottom theater is 1,000 women who did not get a mammogram. So in the women who got the mammogram, we are looking at 4 women who will die of breast cancer from that theater. If you look at the bottom group, these are the women who did not get a mammogram. There's 5 of them who will die of breast cancer. So it's a difference of 1 person out of 5. 1 out of 5 is 20%. Does that make sense? So that's where they're getting that 20% of. So I'm not telling you this because I don't think you should go get a mammogram. I just want you to be fully aware of what getting that mammogram means, what the actual benefit is, and some of the possible harms. And at the end of the day, really my point in going through all of this is to let you know that I just don't think this is enough. Look at all of these women. 1 in 8 women in the United States is going to be diagnosed with breast cancer. It's a lot of women. What can we do? So, are we really catching it early? That's the next important question. So early detection, are we catching it early? I want to show you this graph of the natural growth of cancer cells. So cancer begins as one single cell that's been mutated and is causing problems. In order for that one cell to divide and become 2 cells, it takes about 100 days. That's about 3.5 months. Now, some cancers do grow faster, some grow smaller, but this is just the average doubling time. Okay, so if you look at this, you can see that, it goes from 2 to 4 to 8, on and on. Well, it takes about 10 years before that tumor has grown to 1 centimeter. Now, 1 centimeter is about the width of your finger. And a research study did show that mammograms can only catch a tumor that is around 2 billion cells. So it takes a little over 10 years to reach 2 billion cells. So this cancer is not being caught early. This cancer has been growing in your body for years, likely. And because it's been growing in your body for years, there is a chance that these cells have spread to other parts of your body. So to me, relying on just getting early detection isn't enough. This is why we need to focus on what we can actually do to prevent this first cancer cell from going awry, and if it already has, how to halt that and possibly even reverse it. So we're going to talk about prevention, and this is something that the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine talks about in their October breast cancer awareness. So they call it the 4 prongs. But first of all, before we get into that, I wanted to just let you know that breast cancer, a lot of people think, well, gosh, it's genetic. If my mom had it, if my grandma had it, if my aunt had it, I'm going to get it. But actually only 5 to 10% of breast cancer can be attributed to genetics. Now, there are other ways to prevent breast cancer that they've found, that the medical strategies that you can use. So you can reduce your breast cancer by up to 60% by removing your ovaries or by using a drug called tamoxifen. But these both have severe side effects, and that's something that you can choose to do, but side effects such as uterine cancer, blood clots, things like that. So there's got to be a better way, right? So the PCRM, like I said, they have a website called letsbeatbreastcancer.org where they talk about these 4 prongs, and you can actually go on there and make a pledge. And we'll talk about that at the very end as well. and put a link up there. But the 4 prongs that they talk about are maintaining healthy weight, exercising regularly, limiting alcohol, and choosing plant-based foods. So I want to talk first about the first 3, and then we'll kind of delve more deeply into the 4th. Now, we all know that maintaining a healthy weight is good for overall health, but why is it important for breast health? So maintaining a healthy weight is important because excess body weight increases the odds of getting breast cancer after menopause. Being overweight can also make existing cancer more likely to grow. And one reason that we think this is that it seems that fat cells actually make, well, we know this, that fat cells make estrogen, but we think that because fat cells make estrogen, that the more fat you have on your body, the more estrogen you're going to produce. And that is not good for breast cancer. So the next one is exercising regularly. And this kind of goes hand in hand with maintaining a healthy weight. So exercise helps you maintain a healthy weight. And that's part of it. By losing the weight, you're going to lower those estrogen levels because of the fat cells that are producing those estrogens. Now, the third one, this one is probably one of the more least favorable for people, is limiting alcohol. Everyone likes to have a glass of wine here and there, and I hear you. But boy, alcohol is not good if you're looking to prevent breast cancer. So alcohol itself can increase estrogen levels, like we were just talking about. Alcohol can damage DNA, and DNA, when it's damaged, that is the very first step of cancer starting. So research has shown that even just adding if you just drink 1 drink per day, that your risk of breast cancer increases by 10%. So I want to explain that 10%. So I already mentioned 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer in the United States. So that's 12%, right? So 12% of women. So if you're increasing your risk by 10%, you're just adding 10% of that 12%. So you might increase to 13, 14%. But now if you have 2 drinks a day, that increases it by 30%. 3 drinks a day will increase it by 40%. So you're just increasing the risk the more that you're having alcohol. Now, there was a study by the Harvard Women's Health Study, and that showed that there was almost no increased risk from moderate red wine consumption. Now, why could that be? So it turns out that the grape skin in red wine, but not white wine, just red wine, it possibly can suppress the proliferation of an enzyme called aromatase. Now, aromatase is an enzyme that is used by breast tumors to produce their own estrogen. Again, more estrogen. So that's great, but in order to get that benefit, really all you have to do is get that grape skin. So instead of drinking the red wine that comes with the alcohol that's bad, you can just eat the grapes. So that's what I would recommend. So the final prong we're going to talk about is choosing plant-based foods. So why are plant foods good for breast health? So these are the plant foods. This is why. So healthy whole plant foods. We're not talking about plant-based foods like Oreos, which yes, are all made of plants, no animal products whatsoever. We're talking about healthy whole plant foods, starchy and non-starchy vegetables. So starchy vegetables would be potatoes, corn, non-starchy vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, greens. You've got whole grains, brown rice, quinoa, barley, and then legumes like beans and peas, and then fruits. So why choose the plant-based foods? Because they're typically naturally low in calories. So I don't know if any of you have ever heard of calorie density, but calorie density just means that you get more food for fewer calories. So a potato is going to be very filling in your belly, and compared to the amount of calories in a potato for an amount of olive oil is just going to sit in your stomach and it's not going to satiate you at all. And so you're getting far fewer bulk and satiation from that. The other thing with plant foods is that they're very high in fiber. And we're going to talk about this in just a moment, about the research that's been done with high fiber diets and how that is beneficial for breast health. They're also naturally low in fat. So there are some higher fat plant foods, but for the most part, they're very low in fat. And there's, again, a lot of research that shows that low fat diets are good for promoting health in general. So for all diabetes, hypertension, obesity, low-fat diets. Reducing estrogen levels. This goes back to the talking about where you can reduce estrogen levels by reducing the fat on your body, which comes from the fat on your fork. We talked about that it's satiating. And then flax seeds. So flax seeds are interesting. There's actually been quite a few studies on flax seeds and breast cancer. So there was a large study that showed a decreased risk of breast cancer that correlated with higher serum lignans levels. And lignans are found in flaxseed at about 800 times higher than other plant foods. So they looked at 3,000 women with breast cancer, 3,000 women that did not, and they found that flaxseed alone was correlated with 20 to 30% reduction in breast cancer risk. And then there was another study, and this one was a randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled trial. And if you are in medicine, you know that that is the gold standard of trials. And this found that flax seeds in breast cancer patients appeared to have the potential to reduce the tumor growth in just a matter of weeks. So tumor cell proliferation, which is the growing of the tumor cells, went down, and then also cancer cell death went up. So getting rid of those cancer cells went up, and that's just by using flax seeds. All right, and then the last thing on this is cancer-fighting phytochemicals in cruciferous veggies and in soy. So cancer-fighting phytochemicals. So we have broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts that are considered cruciferous that have phytochemicals in them. Whole soy products, so soy foods such as tofu, soy milk, also have phytochemicals. And the ones that they have are typically isoflavones. So these are known to lower the risk of death from breast cancer, but how does that happen? So if you're familiar with the BRCA or BRCA gene, that is correlated with breast cancer. So cancer works in part by turning off the BRCA genes. So these genes are good. They're responsible for DNA repair. So when your DNA is damaged, whether you're sitting out in the sun and some of your DNA gets damaged, these are some of the genes that help repair that DNA before it goes awry. So they're called tumor suppressors, which makes sense. And cancer cells can actually turn these genes off by methylating them. So that just means that they're putting a little methyl group on the end of this section of DNA. And what that does is it makes that gene not able to do its function by repairing the DNA. So there were some researchers that introduced soy phytonutrients to breast cancer tumors, and they used about the equivalent of a cup of soybeans, and they were able to get these BRCA genes to turn back on and start repairing DNA again. So this suggests that the soy phytonutrients might actually reverse the DNA methylation and allow your genes to do what they're supposed to do by helping repair that DNA. So that's pretty fascinating that soy can do that now. So I wanted to go through some of the research. So we're going to talk about soy first, since we're already talking about soy, and then go into more of the general plant-based diets. So in 2012, there were, at that time, 3 studies that had been done on soy and how it can affect breast cancer. And some researchers did a review of these 3 studies, and they looked at all of them together, and they posted this in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And it showed that women who ate the most soy had 29% lower risk of dying from breast cancer and 36% lower risk of cancer recurrence. So we're not just talking about eating soy to help prevent breast cancer, we're talking about women who've already been diagnosed, lowering their chances of recurrence of that same cancer. So that's amazing. Again, in 2012, in the Asian Pacific Journal of Cancer Prevention, this study reaffirmed the results that were found in the previous 3 studies. So they found that an average intake of about 1 cup of soy milk a day reduced the mortality of breast cancer by about 38%. So the next one was in 2006. So this was published in Nutrition and Cancer. And these researchers found that the effects of not only a plant-based diet, but making a lifestyle change where they walked every day made a difference on tumor cell growth and then also apoptosis, which is basically the destruction of cancer cells. So the fascinating thing with this one is that they found that within only 2 weeks of eating plant-based and walking every day, these participants' blood samples were suppressing cancer growth and killing 20% to 30% more malignant cells than their blood samples were 2 weeks prior. So this is in the same people. They measured the amount of cancer growth and the apoptosis of these cells, and then measured it 2 weeks later in the same person and found 20 to 30% more in that blood sample. Now, the researchers thought that in this one, that it was attributed to decreased levels of insulin-like growth factor, which is IGF-1, and that's found in animal products. In 2013, there was a study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and this one looked at 90,000 women. So 90,000 women, and they found that a plant-centered diet could cut the risk of developing breast cancer by 15%. So what they did was they looked at, of these 90,000 women, they looked at what were the 5 most prominent diets in these women. They found plant-based diet. They found a diet that was high protein, high fat, high in meats, eggs, fried foods. They found a diet high in carbohydrates, high in convenience foods, more packaged foods, pastas, breads, and then an ethnic diet, high in legumes, soy-based foods, rice, dark green leafy vegetables. And then the last diet was a salad and wine diet, which was high in lettuce, fish, wine, low-fat salad dressing, coffee, and tea. So again, what they found is that the plant-based diet was the only one that was associated with a reduction in breast cancer risk, and it was 15%. The next one I wanted to talk about was also in 2013, and this one was from the Cancer Epidemiology, Biomarkers and Prevention Journal. And in this one, researchers followed for about 7 years a group of 30,000 postmenopausal women. These women did not have a history of breast cancer, and they found that just by simply limiting alcohol, eating mostly plant foods, and maintaining a normal body weight was enough to associate with 62% lower breast cancer risk. So out of 30,000 postmenopausal women who did not have breast cancer, 62% lower risk just by having a normal body weight, limiting alcohol, and eating more plant-based. In 2019, in the Women's Health Initiative randomized clinical trial, so again, this is another randomized trial, which is a higher quality trial, researchers followed about 50,000 postmenopausal participants. So what they did was that they compared 2 groups. So they had one group get randomized into a normal diet, which is 32% of calories from fat, yikes. And then they had the other group do a more fat-reduced diet, which is about 20% of calories from fat. What they found was that the people who had the low-fat diet or the 20% fat diet had experienced a 21% reduced risk of dying from breast cancer. And also, as a benefit, 15% reduced risk of dying from any cause at all. The low-fat group also benefit, lost an average of 3% body weight. The last one I wanted to talk about is from this year. So it came out in April of this year. And this is about fiber. So they wanted to look at fiber consumption and breast cancer incidence. So what they did was they looked at those who consumed the most fiber, and they found that these people had an 8% reduced risk of both premenopausal and postmenopausal cancers when compared to those who ate the least amount of fiber. So the authors in this one felt that high fiber diets were associated with not only higher fiber in the diet, which we know has a lot of benefits in and of itself, but also that those people also took in a lot more vitamins, a lot more minerals, a lot more phytochemicals like we talked about, and other compounds that can affect cancer. So now that we know what foods are breast health promoting, what foods should we avoid and why? So let's cut out the bad. So especially bad are avoiding processed meats. So processed meats include things like hot dogs, bacon, lunch meats. These are horrible for breast cancer, but also for colon, prostate, and pancreatic cancer. These should just not ever be fed to anyone. The other thing is avoiding dairy products, and that's something we're going to go to on the next slide. We'll talk about some research in dairy products and the increased risk in breast cancer from dairy products. The other thing to avoid is saturated fat and cholesterol. So cholesterol is found only in animal products. You cannot find cholesterol in plant products ever. And your body, thankfully, makes its own cholesterol. So there is no reason for you to ever ingest cholesterol because your body makes plenty of it. So you don't need to take in extra cholesterol. But avoiding cholesterol and saturated fat basically means you need to avoid animal products such as meat, fowl, fish, dairy, eggs. So the research. So harms of the standard American diet, the SAD diet. So the first one I want to talk about was in 2013. So this was in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute, and it's called the Life After Cancer Epidemiology Study. And they found that in women who were previously diagnosed with breast cancer, that those who consumed one or more servings of high-fat dairy products, and this is cheese, ice cream, whole milk, had a 49% higher breast cancer mortality. So people already diagnosed with breast cancer having a higher mortality compared with those consuming less than 1/2 serving daily. This next one is pretty fascinating. So in 2015, there was a study done. It's called the +1 case control study. So a case control study just means you have a group where people have a disease and a group where they don't have a disease, and you look to see if there's anything that correlates. So in the case control study, what they did was they had people donate 239 breast tissue samples. And they looked at these samples to see if there was something called bovine leukemia virus. So bovine leukemia virus is found in 38% of cows that are used for beef. It's also found in 84% of cows used for dairy. So if you have the bovine leukemia virus in your breast tissue, it turns out, strongly associated with breast cancer diagnosis. So this virus appeared in 59% of those with the cancer. In 2017, the National Cancer Institute study. So this one is where researchers compared the diets of women diagnosed with breast cancer to those who did not have breast cancer, and found that those who consumed the most cheese, American, cheddar, cream cheeses, had a 53% higher risk for breast cancer. And the authors thought that in this case, it was also due to the IGF-1, the insulin-like growth factor that is found in animal products. In 2018, there was a study published in the International Journal of Cancer, and this was a systematic review and meta-analysis. Again, this is another one of those where in basically with medical people, we know that the systematic review and a meta-analysis is a high quality study, because what it does is it looks back at studies that have already been done. It takes them into a big group, it looks at all of the data, and it puts it into new data and analyzes that data as one. So in this one specifically, they looked at 18 studies, and they took all of the data from those 18 studies, and they used that data to basically create this new review. So when they looked at these 18 studies, what they found was, when evaluating the relationship between breast cancer rates and intake of red and processed meat, it showed that there was an increased risk for breast cancer with increased consumption of red meat and processed meat. So the risk for breast cancer went up by 6% if you had red meat, and 9% if you are eating processed meat. The researchers in this study felt that this was attributed to the increased amount of saturated fat, cholesterol, and heme iron found in animal products. This last one is from this year again. So this one's in February of 2020. So this was from the International Journal of Epidemiology, and it was funded by the National Cancer Institute. It was also funded by the World Cancer Research Fund and the National Institute of Health. So in this study, they looked at 50,000 women, and they found that those who reported drinking just 1 cup of cow's milk per day increased their relative risk of breast cancer by 50%. So when I say relative risk, what that means is if all of our risk, our average risk is 12%, that 1 in 8, you're increasing it by 50%. So you take half of the 12, 6, and add it. So now you're going from 12% risk to 18% risk. That's just by adding 1 cup of milk, cow's milk per day. Now, if you consume 2 to 3 glasses per day, now you can increase your risk by up to 80%. So now you're getting into from 12, now maybe your risk is more like 20 or more percent. Now, they felt like the author of this paper thought that the reason that this was happening was because of the association between breast cancer and dairy milk because of the sex hormones in dairy milk. So as cows are lactating, most of them are pregnant. So 75% of a dairy herd is pregnant. And those sex hormones getting into the milk can cause an increased risk of breast cancer. So what they also did in this study, which was interesting, was they looked at the people who, instead of drinking cow's milk, drank soy milk. And just by replacing dairy milk with soy milk, this was associated with a 32% reduced risk of breast cancer. So instead of that 12%, now you're looking at 8 or 9%. So luckily for us, there are people who are starting to recognize this. So it's not just me coming out here trying to tell all of you that all of this data exists. I know that's a lot of information. It's out there and people are starting to recognize this. And this is why it's so important to help spread this message and to help people to really be able to prevent breast cancer. And there are societies out there that are realizing this. And for instance, the American Cancer Society is recommending that we eat mostly vegetables, fruits, grains, and a lot less red and processed meat. And then we also have the American Institute for Cancer Research, which is saying primarily whole plant foods, vegetables, whole grains, beans, fruits, that this can decrease the risk of many cancers, including breast cancer. And then finally, my group, the American Academy of Family Physicians, this came out a couple of years ago in one of their articles, that we should have a primary focus on unprocessed foods, vegetables, plant-based fats and proteins. So plant-based fats and proteins, we're talking about beans and avocados, legumes, whole grains, and nuts. So it's not all doom and gloom. There are people that are starting to realize the power of a plant-based diet. And I'm just thankful that all of you are here. And I hope that all of you will also help spread this message that is so important. Now, I wanted to just let you know I did have a question that was sent in early, so I'm just going to kind of go over that question first, and then I don't know if we have much time to do any other questions. We might have time for maybe 1 or 2. But someone sent in a question regarding plant-based oils. So they had heard from Dr. McDougall, who I worked with in medical school, that plant-based oils are actually worse than animal fats or animal oils. And I looked into it, and it looks like he actually was able to find some studies that had been done, some animal studies. So these are done on mice. And what he found was were 3 different studies that were done in the 70s and 80s that found that if you fed a mouse either a plant-based oil, like sunflower oil, and then you fed another mouse oil from animal product, and then in both of these mice, you gave them some sort of a chemical that basically induced cancer creation, then what they found was that the ones that got the plant-based oils had larger tumors that were more aggressive. So that's where he's getting that from. Basically, at the end of the day, any oil is a highly processed food. I wouldn't even call it a food. If you think about the amount of plant food that needs to go into creating even 1 teaspoon of oil. It's a huge amount. And if you really want to get the benefits from that plant, such as an olive or whatever it is, it's best to just eat the whole plant instead of a highly refined processed part of it. So at the end of the day, avoiding oils when you're eating a whole food plant-based diet is really the key. So I will go ahead and maybe I'll let Harriet, I don't know if there are people that have posted anything in the chat that have questions that we want to go over.
No, we'll invite people to do that. I think we'll leave just a couple of minutes at the end. I'd like to, Sally Lipsky has written a very helpful book, and I'd like to just leave a couple of minutes at the end for her to tell us about that. But we do have a few minutes if we have 2 or 3 questions, and then Dr. Davis, if it's okay with you, then we can, I think you provided your contact information you have on the screen, and we can provide a variety of different ways for people to contact you with additional follow-up questions, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Let's see, Dr. Davis, can you see the questions, or should I let you?
Let's see.
We have one from Judith. What is your opinion on, oops, where'd it go?
Oh, there we go. I'm seeing it now.
Inhibitors, I believe it was. Yes, what is your opinion on aromatase inhibitors?
Oh, right. So yeah, we were talking about aromatase before. That's like, basically when it comes down to it, I think that there are definitely some benefits to using medications in circumstances. But at the end of the day, if it were me, I would focus on what I could do to basically get the most bang for my buck. So what is going to get me the most benefit with the fewest side effects? And to me, switching over to a whole food plant-based diet that is free of oils and focusing on soy, flax seeds is better than relying on a medication that's going to have side effects in the long run. I think that there are some people who are going to choose to take medications, and I think that in some cases it makes a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, I think trying plant foods first is what my recommendation would be.
Okay, thank you. Also, we have a question from Deepthi, and she's asking that for you to please address the soy myth about phytoestrogens.
Yeah, so right. So it used to be that people were saying, well, no, don't take soy if you're worried about breast cancer, or if you have breast cancer, don't eat soy because of the possibility of these phytoestrogens acting like an estrogen and then increasing your risk for breast cancer. But what we now know is that phytoestrogens, actually, what they tend to do is they work on a different receptor than regular estrogens in our body. And they work on a different receptor that if they overtake this receptor, it basically kind of squashes the other receptor that estrogen binds to. So that's how we think that it works with these phytoestrogens, phytonutrients with soy, is that because these bind to these receptors, it doesn't allow estrogen to bind to their receptor that they use. And so it allows your body to not utilize that extra estrogen. So for instance, if you have extra estrogen in your body from fat accumulation in your body, in your muscle cells, then you would be best off trying to eat some soy products to help kind of negate what's happening with the estrogens in the body.
But may I ask you a question? Do you like, there's edamame and tofu and different kinds, or in tempeh, and are they all this, and soy milk, obviously, are they all pretty much the same, or do you think there's a preferred source of soy?
So using more of the whole product. So the tofu is very minimally processed. Edamame is, of course, the whole soybean. Soy milk is minimally processed. So those are more of what I would recommend. Definitely do not recommend the soy-based burgers and hot dogs and things like that, because a lot of what they do is they will strip out the protein from the soy. And when you have that soy isolate that you can find in some of those fake meat products, that is actually cancer promoting. So those are not healthy foods. So there definitely are good soy products and bad soy products for sure. Staying more to the whole food soy product is the best.
Thank you. That's a good segue to our next question. How do you feel about processed plant foods? So it sounds like not so much. You're not recommending those. But although I have to say, it can be a helpful transition, but long.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be honest here. So I am definitely a proponent of a whole food plant-based diet free of oils, and if you can get away from salt and sugar, even better. But I'm also vegan, and I realize that in order for some people to change, that means they need their diet to look just like what their meat diet has looked like in the past. And if that's what they're doing to transition, it's better than the alternative. What I would say is, for most people, if you are transitioning over and that's easier for you, you just start adding in more of the whole foods over time, and you'll get better and better to where you'll love. I mean, I love what I eat. I don't feel like I'm deprived at all. And so the more you can do the whole food plant-based, the better. But I also appreciate what the vegan movement is doing with creating these plant-based products that are meant to act like meat, because of how that can benefit the animals and our environment as well.
And someone is asking, do caffeinated drinks contribute to breast cancer, such as coffee or green tea?
No, in fact, if you guys are familiar with Dr. Greger, he does a great review of the research on caffeine. And I delved into this quite a bit because my husband loves caffeine. And basically what it comes down to is, really, it's up to you. I don't think that drinking caffeine is harmful as long as you're keeping it kind of minimal, maybe a couple of cups of coffee a day. But some people just can't tolerate it. I'm one of those. It makes me super jittery. I just don't feel right. And there was a time when I was drinking coffee and I got off of it for a month, and I went through some major withdrawals. And in fact, such harsh withdrawals that I went through almost a depression, and I don't have any sort of a history of depression. And so that was really scary to me. So I decided that for me, caffeine and coffee just wasn't a good mix. So I really think that it comes down to how you tolerate it best. But as far as increasing breast cancer risk, no.
Okay. So we do have a couple more questions, but we're at 6:57. I really want to give Sally Lipsky the opportunity to talk about her book and how it's benefiting the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And if Dr. Davis is willing and what have you, we can stay on a few more minutes, a few minutes past the hour, and do a couple more questions. Is that okay with you, Dr. Davis?
Sure.
Okay. Hi, Sally. Do you want to tell us about your book and how that's benefiting the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine?
Sure. Can you see this? No. Ah, boy. Okay. Share screen. And let me just go here. Okay. So what I wanted to just mention quickly, because I promised PCRM I would do this, it's that Dr. Davis already mentioned it. They have a Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign going on this month, and you can go to their website and sign up for it, take the pledge. You'll get a free cookbook, you'll get some emails, and you might get to win some prizes, okay? And all October book sales of my book, Beyond Cancer, The Powerful Effect of Plant-Based Eating, all sales are going towards supporting PCRM and the work they do. Also, I put it in the chat room, but you can also email me. We're having a follow-up, and our wonderful plant-based chef, Brittany Giroudi is going on October 21st. She's making some marvelous, family-friendly recipes, easy, practical. And so do sign up because that will be a fun and informative session. And if you have any questions, you can always email me at plantbasedeatinghub@gmail.com. Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you.
thanks, Sally. Really appreciate that. We have 2 or 3 other questions, so we'll just take a few minutes, and then, like I said, folks have Dr. Davis's contact information. Somebody is asking, Linda asked about, what about us about Butler soy curls? Dr. Davis, what do you think about? I don't know if you've used.
Yeah, good question. Actually, I think those are great. Those are one thing that are very minimally processed, surprisingly, because they look very, very convincing. But basically, it's just soybeans that have been smashed and dehydrated. So that would be a great option for people who are transitioning, where it's minimally processed. You get that soy, and it's helping people get that feeling of eating something similar to what they're used to. So yeah, I think that the soy curls are a great find.
Very glad to hear you say that. It's become one of our favorite go-to for so many different kinds of dishes. It's so versatile. That's one of the things I like about them the best.
Yeah.
And just 2 other quick questions. Somebody says they read Dr. McGregor's book. I'm assuming that's How Not to Die, that mushrooms act as a natural aromatase inhibitor. So is estrogen level checked through blood work? And is there a way to know if natural inhibitors are working as well as a medicine? So those are kind of 3 questions in one. So the mushroom.
Yeah. So yeah, I had heard about the mushrooms before from Dr. Greger. And then what was the other question about?
Is there a way, is estrogen level checked through blood work? How does one know?
Oh, right. I mean, you can, but it's not something that's typically done unless there's a good reason for it. So I would just talk to your doctor about that if you have some sort of a diagnosis that warrants you needing to get that checked.
And is there any way we know if we can check if the natural inhibitors are working as well as the medicine?
I think that comes down to looking at the research that's been done with them. And if you go to Dr. Greger's website, I guarantee he's got a great video about the research that's been done that shows that.
And we'll end on, which I think is a really great question. When do you think this dietary information that's so valuable that you've been providing this evening will make it to the oncology offices and to the on-staff nutritionists? They were very concerned when I told my physician, my doctors, I was eliminating meat during chemo. So I think that's a great question to end with.
Yes. So, gosh, there's a couple of answers to this. I think one of them is that doctors eat the standard American diet. Most doctors eat that way. So you look back in history, there was a time when most doctors smoked. So why would they tell their patients not to smoke? They're doing it themselves. Same thing with the diet. They don't want to give up their bacon. And they're certainly not going to tell you that you need to do that to help prevent breast cancer or any other cancer. So that's part of the problem, is that they are afflicted with the disease themselves. I mean, the number 1 killer of cardiologists is heart disease. So that's part of it. The other part of it is that eating plant-based diet doesn't make money. And I know that's horrible to say, but there is benefit to swarms of people going in and getting screenings, getting biopsies, getting tests, getting treatments. There's a lot of money in it. And I know I want to give all physicians, the benefit of the doubt that they're doing the right thing and they don't want harm to come to people. But it is a business at the end of the day. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Okay. Well, thank you so much once again, Dr. Davis, for your time. I feel like I have learned so much this evening. I feel like it's really a treasure trove of information, and we'll be providing the links. And I hope everybody will have this as a resource and really to share with their friends, with their communities, what have you. So I think it's been a really great educational evening, and this is so important. And I really like the way you also pointed out that plant-centered, plant-strong diet is also helpful, not just for helping prevent breast cancer, but in so many other ways as well. So once again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And Sally and I will probably continue to plan some other events. And I'm sure we'll have Dr. Davis back if she's hopefully willing to join us again. So thanks so much, and go out and eat some plants. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.